Hey, my name's Tim, and I'm an executive coach, consultant, and trainer. And I work with leaders of all shapes and sizes to help them to deliver value. And I've had this idea that for a while now, that a lot of the things that I use, the tools and techniques that I use, I first learnt back when I was in a band. I used to play bass in a rock band when I was in my teens and my early 20s. And back then, we had to learn things like teamwork, how to have cross functional skills. I was a bass player, but I also did the website and all of these things. Um, and I'm out here in Hong Kong at the moment doing some work with a client. And one of the things that I thought about was the idea of the MVP, that it's best just to get something out there. When I first did this, and I naturally went to, I wanted something that was perfect. And my friend Norf and I, we spent some time, got some cameras and lights and did some interviews and things. And it was really, really good, but it was kind of missing something. And last week we decided that we were just going to record something really simple, a podcast on Riverside, just from our own home offices. And that's what this episode is. It's far from perfect, but the idea is I wanted to get something out there so I can learn and see what you guys think as to whether or not this is something useful. So enjoy this first episode. It's far from perfect, but it's one of the things that I learned in a band.
Welcome, Paul Norford.
Thank you, Tim Jackson. It's great to be here. I really appreciate it.
We have been talking about this for some time. The idea of I learned it in a band. Do you want to give a little intro about who you are, what's your name, where'd you come from?
Again, thanks for the opportunity, Tim. It's great to be here. So my name is Paul Norford, and at the moment I am a founder director of a company called True Norf. And inside that company, we do sales enablement, profiling. We create sales enablement content. I'm also an event host and public speaker. I'm also a content creator and a social media strategist. So I feel like a bit of a Swiss Army knife in one 6'2" canister. So that's what I do at the moment, Tim.
Yeah, but that's not where I know you from, is it?
It is not, Tim. It's not. So we've known each other I think we've known each other for the best part of 20 years now. I'm sure it's about that sort of time.
It will be about 20 years, yeah.
And you and I obviously share something in common. If you were to look at a band, we are the rhythm section of that band. And that's where we met. So I'm a drummer. I started playing drums when I was 5 years old. And obviously my life has kind of connected with you, and I'm pleased that we've synced up, which is brilliant.
Mm.
And we used to make music together. So I used to be on drums, and you were quite a fierce bass player.
I do like a bit of bass. You like a bit of bass playing.
Cracking bass player. Absolutely cracking bass player.
Anyway, right. So what I wanted to talk to you about, Paul Norford of True Norf, is the concept of deliberate practice. Generally, people are just trying to improve at something.
Yes.
Right. Doesn't matter whether or not that's public speaking, or you're developing a software product, or car, or whatever. Ultimately, we're trying to improve something.
Right.
And one of the things that the rules that you hear quite a lot about is the 10,000 hour rule. Which was made popular by a guy called Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers, right? The thing is that what Malcolm Gladwell did is he took an idea which was from K. Anders Ericsson from the book Pete, and just simplified it. So 10,000 hours sounds great. It's really easy to remember, but that number is a little bit arbitrary. And basically what deliberate practice says is it's not just about the 10,000 hours, it's about how you spend those hours that is going to actually cause you to improve.
So the intentional aspect behind putting hours into those 10,000 hours, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So an example that Anders Ericsson uses is we may go and spend 10,000 hours playing tennis on a Saturday. Right. Mm-hmm. If you and I go and do that on the local tennis court and just knock a ball about, we'll have fun. We might get a little bit fitter, but we probably won't get that much better at tennis.
Yes.
Right. the difference between that and someone that is a world-class tennis player is how they spend that time. And essentially that's what deliberate practice is all about. It's about breaking down a series of steps to make sure that we use that time for maximal effectiveness. And that is really what it's all about.
And you can apply that to not just sport, and there's all the sports analogies under the sun where you look at the incremental gains approach of you try, you repeat, you practice, refine. But that incremental gains, there's a whole lot of work that goes behind it. And you have sports psychologists, you have sports nutritionists, you have coaches, trainers, and all those things in order to help you drive those incremental gains. The same can be applied in our world as musicians. So back to the example that I gave, if there was a phrase or a piece that we're trying to learn, we would repeat it over and over and over again. We would also look to slow it down to make sure that we've got the right elements playing at the right time before we then increase the speed and then add the rest of the instruments on top, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in Bassland, if I'm going to learn to play Sir Duke by Stevie Wonder, Bassland,
yeah,
then that's going to and so on.
Yes.
Right. We would break that down into stop.
Yep.
And play that bit again and loop it and slower, but even slower than that. Bum, whatever.
Yep.
And then we break it down into smaller, more manageable chunks. Get that under your fingers, and then you do the next bit, and then you piece those bits together, and so on and so forth.
And to your point, the same in Drumsville. So there's, come on, I had to have it, Tim. I
love it. I will take it.
I'm seeing a lot of drummers pop up on Instagram.
Yeah,
and they're breaking down particular well-known tracks, and obviously one of the best well-known drum tracks is Rosanna by Toto, and the drummer that put it together was Jeff Porcaro. And there's a number of drummers who are effectively playing what Jeff Porcaro created, that soundtrack in Rosanna. It's a really cool little shuffle, right? It's a really beautiful shuffle. But in order to piece it together, it sounds really simple. When you sit at a drum kit and to play it, your four limbs are doing four completely different things. So in order to get your arms and your legs behind it, you have to break down each section. So for example, the right hand playing the hi-hat would be a shuffle. The left hand on the snare drum is also a bit of a shuffle, but you've got ghost notes that are in there as well. Your left foot is sat on the hi-hat. Sometimes it opens, sometimes it stays shut. And then you've got your right foot, which is on the bass pedal. That's doing something else as well. But in order to get that incremental gain, to play that all together and at speed, you have to break all four sections down, see where they cross over. But you also have to put all of them together at some point to play at the right time. It's a completely different. It's a difficult element to play, but the only way that you can play it is by breaking it down to your point and playing it really slowly, one section at a time.
And I think this is a really good way to then bring this back into what that might look like in business land, and whether or not you're working with another thing other than business land. I feel like there should be something else.
I've just come up with one, Tim. So
okay,
you had Bassland. I've just had Drumsville.
Yeah.
How do we now apply this on Business Boulevard?
Business Boulevard.
You can have that one for free.
I want a t-shirt. Business Boulevard. Done. Happy days. Okay, so let's have a look at Business Boulevard. Now, we've talked about some of the concepts about how we break down a song or a groove or
yes.
my steel. I was going to say Steely Dan, but I mean Steely Dan's another one. all of
cracking band.
Stevie Wonder is what I did do. But let's then have a look at the steps for deliberate practice or purposeful practice. And we can look at what that means in a business world or maybe in a band as well. So the first one, are you ready?
I'm ready.
You were born ready.
I was born
so
ready, baby.
the first and these aren't necessarily these are sequential rather than priority order, right? So the first thing is set a really specific goal. Okay, so we in our music land, bassland, Drumsville, we've got, maybe it is, I want to learn a Jimi Hendrix solo, or I want to, or something like that, right? We want to set a very specific goal as to what we want to do or we want to do it. Now, in the business world, this is where we look at things like objectives and key results, OKRs. Where is it that we want to get to, and how are we going to measure our progress towards that goal? And if we don't have that really specific goal and we can't articulate it really clearly, it's really easy for us to kind of lose our way, right? So that's the first thing. Set a really, really specific goal of something that you want to achieve. And that is going to, if we go to OKR land and objectives and key results, that helps us to retain that radical focus and be really intentional about where we're going to spend our time and what we're actually trying to do.
Yes. Okay? Good words. Yep.
Specific goals is absolutely critical for everything that we're doing. The next one I think is really interesting, which is getting out of your comfort zone. Now,
good one.
I've been here many a time where I remember when I first started playing bass and I wanted to learn slap. And I basically had a bit of a party piece that I would always play. Because people say, "Oh, play bass," and people don't want to hear you go. They want to hear you go. They want it.
Yes.
So I learned a party piece, which I was, excellent at, but that didn't necessarily make me get good and progress in my ability to play slap bass, because I'm just staying well within my comfort zone. And one of the things that we find in music and also for teams is we want to be constantly pushing that boundary all the time, where maybe we're taking on just a little bit more. And in the industry we use the phrase sandbagging. It's like we're not necessarily, we're just getting really comfortable with delivering whatever we're delivering, but in order to improve we need to find a way to push ourselves beyond the comfort zone. And the same thing is true if we're going to be playing something in music, right? It might be, well, I'm very comfortable with playing a basic "We Will Rock You" type bass line, but maybe there's other things and things that we want to try and expand in order to try and get better. The next one is focus on the process, not just the outcome.
Yes.
And this is really, I think, where the discipline starts to come in. And it's really easy for us to just sit down and just play. Or the example that Anders Ericsson uses is playing tennis on a weekend, or playing football. You might just go and kick a ball around or knock a ball around. You're probably not actually going to get that much better. I went to the same school as Tim Henman.
Yes.
Not at the same time, but we had the same PE teacher. And he said that one of the things that was absolutely incredible about Tim, that made him stand out above anybody else, is if his coach said, "Go and hit forehands against the wall for 2 hours," he would go and hit forehands against the wall for 2 hours. He wouldn't do backhands or do anything else. But he was so focused on the actual process of getting better and making sure that he is fully focused on that.
Consistent as well, because the fact that he hit forehands to a wall for 2 hours, there's a level of, to your point, process, but also consistency. And I think knowing the difference between the consistencies, I think, makes the great from the exceptional.
Yeah. It's the muscle memory that you get by doing it, and just really going into the process wholeheartedly, not trying to shortcut it and cut corners, and making sure that you are just being really, really disciplined in executing it.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head in terms of muscle memory, because that's exactly what it is. It then becomes second nature, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, the next one. Practice with intention and full focus. Now, one of my favorite examples of this is, well, you, as a bass player anyway, I'm sure you have a drum analogy as well. But one of the things that we would do is we'd sit and play scales or play a riff. And when we're playing that, we're not just focusing on playing the right notes at the right time, because that is really important, but also that is really, it's like basic.
It is.
But in order to really improve, and like this is what all the pros would do, is you're thinking about the right notes at the right time, with the right feel, with the right tone. Are we looking at short notes, long notes? Like, are we mixing that up? Are we thinking about some of the things in my world, like fret buzz? You might play fretless, or like the double bass that I've got behind me, where you're constantly looking at intonation as well. And like, you can be slightly flat or slightly sharp, and like, you're constantly looking at that at any kind of area of weakness that you want to try and improve on. And I think this is really important, is that as we're starting to practice these things, looking at what the data and things that we have and the way that we're approaching our practice is absolutely critical for us to improve. And in the business world, if we're looking at scrum teams, we're looking at people that are delivering, we normally have data and dashboards and stuff like that. And we need to make sure that we're using that to take a real critical eye on the work that we're doing, and not just going, oh, we were late, or this one rolled over we just missed our deadline or whatever, but actually then going back and saying, well, why? What is actually going on in that moment? Yes. Why did I commit to it in the first place? What was, like, I never would have gone into saying, I'm going to be able to do this by the end of the week without thinking about it. I must have assumed at that point that I would be able to do it.
Yeah.
So what knowledge was I working on, or what was my perspective at that time that made me think that I could do this? Because we don't like to set ourselves up for failure.
Correct.
Right? So that's really important, to actually thinking about that full focus. It's actually one of my favorite authors, a guy called Safi Bakal, and he says, listen to the suck with curiosity.
What a great phrase. Listen to the suck with curiosity.
Yeah. So don't go on a witch hunt. Don't go and try and blame people for what not succeeding, but assume good intent, and assume that everyone is there to try and do something which is really, really to do good work. And then think, well, if we didn't manage to do that, then why? And there are going to be all sorts of things that are going to come out. Maybe culturally, you don't feel comfortable being able to say no.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Maybe you didn't have all the information. Maybe they hadn't seen the data that was going to inform the decision. Maybe that came in too late, or maybe they're too busy to be able to look at it and review it and actually digest it before committing it. Maybe there's something that we need to do then in order to give enough time for people to actually analytically have a look at what is actually going on, so that they can make a better decision next time. And I think that's really, really interesting. So the idea of actually having full focus and being really intentional about the decisions that we're making, and looking for any area to improve, whether or not that's a small buzz that I'm getting out of my first finger because that's not strong enough or whatever, or maybe it's something that we constantly do the same minor mistake over time, which ultimately is stopping us from improving overall.
And to your point, it's really driving the incremental improvement gains that we talked about earlier. Right? It's listening out and being intentional to listen out for those adjacencies, to be able to see how we can adjust those in order to improve the overall output.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. The next one, use feedback loops.
Feedback loops.
Feedback
Nobody
loops.
likes feedback, Tim.
No one
Why
likes
should we use feedback loops?
But this is the thing, right? So what we used to do back in the band is we used to record every single one of our practices. And we had, back in the day, wasn't like it is now, North, where we can have like, well, actually, we did have like 24 tracks also, because that was, I do like my tech, as you know.
I do. I know very well.
But we would, we started off with just like a little hard disk recorder type thing where we had the bare minimum, but we'd record a groove, a song, a practice, and we'd do that for a couple of hours or whatever, and then we'd come back and we'd listen to it, and we'd play it to other people as well and say, what do you think about this? Do you think this is good? You know, there's, have you seen the Lewis Capaldi documentary?
I haven't. No, it's on my list of things to watch. Actually,
it's absolutely brilliant. But there's a really interesting scene in that where he's just written like another like 5 songs or something for his next album, and he plays the recording of it, which has done a demo in his little home studio in his garage, and he plays it to his parents, and they're like, it's not your best, and he's just poured his heart out. But then he's like, but because he's got that fast feedback, he's like, back to the drawing board then.
Right. Which is pulling the rug out from under you.
I know, right? But this is the thing. I was reading about Ed Sheeran earlier.
Yes.
And he quite famously, I thought when I was doing a little bit of research into it, I was thinking, I'm sure I had read somewhere that he would write a song a day, but I was wrong. He doesn't write a song a day.
Okay.
He writes 5.
What?
5
Gracious
songs.
me.
That's kind of fairly standard. He'll write 5 songs.
Wow.
And of the 100 songs that he writes, 12 will be good.
Wow. 12% conversion.
Yeah, it's not bad, is it?
That's not shabby at all.
As proven by Ed Sheeran in the stadiums that he sells out. But it's really interesting that a lot of that comes from these fast feedback loops. And we do this, and there's all sorts of things that you'll see in the business world, in the agile world. There's things like the OODA loop, which comes from aviation and from the US Air Force.
Yes.
Which is observe, orient, decide, and act. Where that's kind of one thing that we do. Plan, do, check, and adjust is another one. The Deming wheel, and there are millions of them, right? That are all basically doing the same thing, which is do something, like plan something, do it, see how that works, and then you decide what to do next.
Yes.
And in fact, Dave Thomas, who's one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto, or the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, I should say, to use its proper name. But what Dave Thomas says is it's all really simple. All we should do is take a small step in the direction that we think that we should go in, then have a look at what happened, and then decide what to do next. That's it, right? Basic feedback loops. That's what agility is all about.
Right.
And so the same thing is true, and I think we did that straight away back in the band, where we would do something, we'd record it, and then we'd make a fairly quick decision. Was that good? Was it no? Oh, maybe it's too fast. Maybe you should do this. You should do that. Because if you're just in the moment, then you're never going to get that feedback. And then play it to other people, play it to your customers. You know, for us, it was our fans. We had fans back in the day.
Indeed.
So get that feedback really quickly. Get feedback from your customers, and then decide what to do next.
Absolutely. And to that point, it may not be that the feedback is negative. We have this mindset that, if I'm going to give you feedback, it's going to be negative. Actually, no, it's going to be very much constructive. What you played there was phenomenal. What you said there was super good. Yeah. What you did there was great. Can you repeat that? Yeah. So it then reinforces that that's a small step in the right direction. Let's keep going. Back to Dave Thomas's point.
Yeah, absolutely. I was watching. I'm going back to sport. I know I learned it in a band, but I do probably more sport analogies than anything else. But I was watching a crazy documentary the other week on Ross Edgley, the guy who's just broken the world record for the longest swim.
Oh my goodness.
510 kilometers in one go.
My word.
It's like over 55 hours swimming down a river in Canada.
When he got out, was he a bit kind of prune-like?
He was very prune-like. check out the videos and stuff.
Oh,
It's an amazing documentary on YouTube.
Wow.
About resilience and everything, and teamwork as well. Because in order to accomplish that, he had a team of nutritionalists and scientists and stuff that were with him every step of the way.
Yes.
And interestingly, he also says in the documentary that this genuinely, like, he doesn't say it just to be humble, but he would not be able to do this without every single member of that team. Like, yes, it's him that's going one arm after the other, and it's his athleticism that makes it possible, but he still wouldn't be able to do it without the whole team.
Yeah, correct. And it's the whole team.
It's the whole team. But I digress to my point. So this idea of looking at an area of weakness, in the video, in fact, I think it might have been another video that was around it, was by him as well. But he went to Loughborough University over here in the UK,
yes,
which has got a real strong reputation for sports generally and sports science. And they did some studies on swimmers, and he was in the top 1% of all swimmers, which is not surprising. I mean, the guy swims around the UK, for crying out loud. It's ridiculous.
The fun. Yeah, sure. Exactly.
Just popping out for a swim around Great Britain.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, cheers. But one of the things that he says in it as well, so he was in the top 1%, but in terms of strength, he was in the top 1% of the top 1%.
No way. Wow.
So what was really interesting is he then said, so when he's in the gym and training for this, strength is not the thing that he needs to work on, because that's not his weakness. Yes. What he needs to be able to do is the kind of the mobility and stuff, which is going to give him maximal efficiency in every stroke that he's taking, because you can't swim 510 kilometers without being incredibly efficient in what you're doing.
With every stroke and every kick.
You know, there are times in the I won't spoil the documentary, but it's incredible some of the things that he has to do. But it's that idea of actually focusing on weakness and finding those small things that you have that are inhibiting your progress, and then looking at how you can take that and improve it and expand on it. And that kind of dedication to the process is really, really important.
Yes, I agree. And you mentioned a great phrase, and I think there's a whole notion behind a weakness. I think if you were to reframe that, and my friend James Porter, who's also a drummer, curiously, he reframes a weakness. You know James Porter.
James Porter was like the first proper drummer I ever played with.
Yes, still a phenomenal player. He's not played in a while, but he's still a phenomenal player. So he has his own consultancy, and he talks about weaknesses, but he reframes it as an opportunity for upgrade, which I actually really like. Because again, you're doing the same thing, but it's just a shift in mindset, and it makes it more palatable for you to go, well, I'm not particularly good here, so I'm going to upgrade it, or I'm going to improve it, or I'm going to double down on it, as our American cousins would say. But just reframing that as an opportunity for upgrade, I think is great.
Yeah, talking about feedback, I mean, it's probably one of the most brutal bits of feedback that I've ever been given was by James Porter.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
Is that the same James Porter that we're talking about?
Yeah, I was probably about 15 at the time.
Yeah.
Hadn't been playing bass, but I probably was doing this, like, the slap thing.
Yeah.
And James Porter said to me, it's like, bass player, didn't know my name, bass player, has anyone ever told you that you're supposed to play with the kick drum? And I was like, no one had told me that.
Now, that's an interesting point, right?
Yeah, because, but then this is what he did. He then said, let's do a really simple groove, and I'll play something, and then and it would have been like boom, cat, boom, boom, cat. And it's like, just try to lock in and only play with this. And there was just such a great learning. I mean, that was one of the first times as a little 15-year-old, like that was the first time I was told to do that. It was brilliant, but brutal at the same time.
But actually, if we were to zoom out and take a look at that, although the feedback felt brutal, it actually improved your playing massively.
In a matter of minutes.
Correct.
Right? Because then I started to understand, which is a big thing around teamwork. I understood what my role was within the band. What function was I there to play? Because I'd learned to play bass until that point.
Yes.
Just bass amp, playing around on my own
in a
my
silo.
bedroom. In a silo.
Effectively.
Yeah. And then I realised that, well, actually, if I'm going to play in a band, it's different, and I need to learn how to, that means that I'm not just going to be super, super flashy and do all of this other stuff, and actually turns out not even doing it that well, because once you actually integrate it with other people, then you need to think differently about what you're doing. So whilst you might be really good at doing something on your own, once you come into a group, then things change, right?
Yes, that integration piece and that teamwork, actually, because you've got to serve a greater purpose, which is the song. You then have to figure out where you slot in, where you would, dare I say, amp up, where you would dial things back a bit in order to serve that greater purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, isn't it?
Very cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
So there are some other things that we can talk about here as well, and in the interest of time, I don't think we should go into lots and lots of detail. But it's really interesting to some of the other principles and some of the best practices around deliberate practice, breaking things into sessions. So break even your practice sessions. Don't just go for 3 hours, but be really intentional about the time that you're going to spend, and break it down into smaller chunks so you actually have enough rest in order to focus on the thing that you're doing, to make sure you do it with maximum focus as well.
And to achieve the outcome that you set out. So you may practice for 3 hours, but you've got to define before those 3 hours, this is the outcome, this is the thing that we want to learn. And then you're able to measure that because you've set an absolute goal.
Yeah, the clarity, and this is where the sequential bit comes in. The clarity of your goals at the outset allows you that intentional focus on what you're trying to achieve, and maximizes your overall efficiency.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel we may have just set up another episode of I Learned It in a Band podcast.
Tell me more.
No, I'm just thinking there's more that we can discuss here. There's more about
so much more.
There's more about feel and concepts that we could talk about in another episode of I Learned It in a Band, couldn't we, Tim?
I really think we should, because I think this is, there's way more than we can accomplish in one, and just this idea of deliberate practice is just one thing as well. Other things that kind of fit around this as well, things like tracking your progress as well, like how are you actually going to see that improvement? And that's going to help you to not just feel like you're doing all right, but actually give you some more feedback really about whether or not what you're doing is actually having an effect.
Yes, absolutely.
Building on previous successes as well. Once you start to master something, then choose something else which is maybe a little bit harder. That idea about actually reaching and doing things outside of your comfort zone, but also don't just feel like you always have to stay in your lane. Don't just always do that one thing, because actually you might learn something by, if you're a rock player, well, some of the things that have made me a much better rock player was learning the double bass, because it strengthened my hands. It got me into a bit more jazz and walking bass lines and stuff like that, which can then carry over into other areas of your life as well, which I think is really, really important.
You're absolutely right. And it's something that I talk about, that you and I have spoken about. It's that notion of adjacencies. So this is the lane that you're in. What's to your right? What's to your left? Can you take some of the elements from those adjacencies and pull them into what you're doing? And it's stretching your comfort zone. You have to be uncomfortable with stepping out of your comfort zone. But in order to learn those things, that's the only place where you're going to learn them. So look at those adjacencies, pull in some of those elements, suck at something new, dare I say.
I love
But
it.
actually,
Yeah.
the more you do it, the better you're going to get, which means that eventually you'll become an expert in whatever that adjacency was. Then you repeat the entire process again to push your adjacencies even wider.
Yeah. I love that phrase that you've used it. You've used it before, but suck at something new
Yeah.
is. Oh, I think it's so powerful. Like if there's that's growth, right? Is expanding your horizons into other things that maybe you hadn't thought possible, and all of that kind of stuff is really important.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah. The place where I think is a really good place to close on this as well is be patient and be persistent.
Patient, persistent, follow the process.
Yeah. Trusting the process in setting specific goals, getting slightly out of your comfort zone, focus on the process, practice with full focus, get feedback, but use feedback loops as well. If you trust that by going through this process, you are going to get better, and look for those results as well as you're tracking your progress, and then just make sure you just keep on doing it with diligence, and be deliberate about the practice that you're putting in. If you're working in a team, if you're working in Agile, you're working in Scrum or something like that, use the data and things that you have at your that is available in order to see how you are progressing, and make sure that you're getting that valuable feedback from customers, from the teams, from other places as well. And then that's going to give you confidence that you, not just that you think that you're improving, but actually you can justify that, yeah, we're doing this and it is absolutely working. And I think that's really, really important as well.
I could not agree anymore, Tim.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Norford, I think that is more than enough for just one episode, just to see how some of these principles can be applied from our world in music, and how we can take them into our other teams, and no matter what we're doing. As we said, this is not just about being in a band. Like for us, we learnt it playing bass and playing drums growing up, and playing in rock bands. But it could come from anywhere, right? It's not necessarily about the music, but a lot of the principles I think we'll find, a lot of the challenges that we're trying to address tend to be about people at the end of the day. And whether or not it's sport, we've talked about sport a lot today, we've talked about music, there are all sorts of different areas that we can take, and we can learn from, and hopefully creatively apply that into our world.
Indeed we can. Thanks for having me on the podcast, Tim. It's been great being here. Thank you so much.
It's been awesome. For anyone that wants to get hold of you, where would they find you, young North?
They would find me on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find me on YouTube as well. Just type in True Norf. You'll also find me on my website, which is truenorf.co.uk.
North with an S.
North with an S, N-O-R-F. Although, curiously, I was born in South London. Go figure.
And we'll end it there.